All right, without further ado, I am very much looking forward to this. We have the reprise of Max Hollingsworth, architect of the tutorial that was on Monday. And if you missed it, or even if you participated, this will be a refresher of, I believe, what you guys did and how it went. And we are looking for some audience participation as well. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Billy.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, so on the schedule, it says, I forget what they put on there as what this session was supposed to be. But when we were planning it, no one here wants to see slideshows or just a long half-an-hour speech, right? We have half an hour? I think it's half an hour. No one's supposed to hear a half an hour of what we did on Monday. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be driven by you guys. And if you all are going to be quiet, it's going to be a very long 30 minutes of just staring at Max and I. So I will give a real quick update, but then really what we want to do is we want to engage with everyone here as to their thoughts, positive, negative, be brutally honest. Max and I can take it, and go forward. So really recap, not getting into details of what happened, right? So we normally have a tutorial for ISART. For those who've been here in the past, they've seen it. They've usually been background information on a certain topic. You might talk about something to do with radars or something to do with millimeter wave or whatever. They were more lecture-based, educational in that sense. And so in the topic of the frictionless reproducibility and these sorts of aspects that we were thinking about, we wanted to, as we mentioned on Monday, do something that's more engaging, actionable, and get people kind of right involved. We're talking about this thing about clutter. Some of you are engineers, some of you are policy folks, but to immediately be able to do hands-on interaction with data and modeling and kind of quickly build that mental picture of, oh, these are the sorts of things we're thinking about, even if you're new to the field. And so we started thinking about this process of, okay, how can we do a software tutorial with interaction? That started to go down. Max correctly pointed out that having people install software on systems, especially government computers, is going to be 3 hours of Max doing IT troubleshooting and us getting nowhere. And he said, we could do this Kubernetes, Azure, the magic of the cloud. And it was great. And my opinion, I don't want to prejudge the bias the jury here. So we stood this up. Max, Anthony Romanella online did a lot of work helping out as well. But Max spearheaded this whole online kind of tutorial that we went through. There was a lot of you involved. There was maybe 30 people in the room, something like that at the time. And there was quite a bit online as well. And so it was for you yourselves here, ISART, we had clutter in that, but it was also a pilot from ITS's standpoint, right? It wasn't just for you, but this is a pilot idea that we are thinking that what we did for the tutorial can be much bigger, broader topic, more engaging, different types of problems. We wanted to talk with you guys. So I'm going to stop talking to Max if you want anything, but then we're going to open the floor. But really we want to get is we'd like to have feedback. What was good? What was bad? We could talk to where we think from our perspective these things can go, but we want to go places where people want to follow us in a way, because as I mentioned in my one question in the other panel, at the end of the day, there's finite resources and we want to invest where the biggest impact is. So we really like to engage and get feedback as to what folks think of that. So Max, I'll turn it to you and then we can kind of turn it to the audience a bit here, if you want anything.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that the online portion is important to us too. And so if people who are currently online and were online on Monday have some thoughts that they'd like to share, that would be great.
You want to say we're going to keep it up too?
Oh, yeah. And we're going to keep this up for a while. I think we'll certainly have it up for the next week. So if there are some people who weren't able to participate on Monday and they'd like to give it a shot, they haven't set everything up, they can go to the agenda and it'll take you to the link with the repo, find the quick steps. It involves emailing me your GitHub username. Happy to get you set up and so you can run it over the next couple weeks. So
pass it to a colleague or something, if you've done it and you want to spread it here. So there's a second bite at that apple.
Yeah, so we'll keep it up for a while just so those of you who still haven't had a chance to do it can.
So I guess with that, let's turn it over first. Like I said, we just fire away on thoughts and comments, and we'll use that as discussion points. Jeremy, you're going to take the microphone around.
Hi, Nick Lanneman from Spectrum X in Notre Dame here. Again, I thought the tutorial was awesome. If we consider it in light of this frictionless reproducibility theme that we saw earlier today, I would say maybe it's missing the key performance metric, clearly defined metric to use as the benchmark to make it into, the word challenge was used in the tutorial, but not, I think, in the same sense as what we saw in the frictionless reproducibility paper and talk. So I might encourage you to think about, can we make such a metric, number one, maybe do it quickly, and if you like, I'm happy to fan it out within Spectrum X and try to get as many students to work through it and see if they can actually contribute something meaningful back. They're all, we're in summer mode now. It's a good time to tinker. And it might help grow the community.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. So there's the whole data set that's going to be released in a month or so. And so there's a lot of data that isn't included in the tutorial. And so one success metric could be we pick one of those data sets that will be released soon and say, that'll be our holdout data. Try and do as good as you can on the data that we have released with the tutorial, the 5 data sets that are in there. And then we'll test people's, if they'd like to email code@ntia.gov when they have a working model or something they'd like to submit, we'll test it against one of these holdout data sets that will then be released. And we could use that as a success metric.
Yeah, one of the things at one point that we kicked around is kind of trying to evaluate what in a challenge sense is if you release all the data, the measurement data when we get that out, and actually we just stood up an instance of box.com so we can make the environmental data, the surface model and the train models for all the data sets as well, easily downloadable and being able to pull in. Is there something you can say, like, who can find the most predictive metric, or doing a regression analysis, a simple or kind of controlled type problem that you can put out there that people can start to work with data. If I filter the data in this way for these subset of the data, I can get a correlation, an R-square component of X and of some value, and who can find kind of what's the highest value, and that can lead to further research and to further input and discussion on this because you're thinking. And so maybe it's forming around that. We wanted to have something honestly before ISART, but we didn't even know what to expect going in. And so that metric at the end isn't there because we weren't sure even how to define that or how the whole tutorial itself would kind of play out. So like I said, it really was a trial balloon. It was essentially a whole beta process that we did here. You guys are all beta testers. Thank you. But yeah, those are some things that we were kind of thinking about how to frame a problem like that.
I guess aside from brainstorming right here, that sounds like a great idea, and let's follow up on that.
Remember the leaderboard too.
Ah, yes, gamify is what you're saying.
Well, that's what Donahoe said.
Yeah, no, Nick said, remember a leaderboard, and I joke, but I think that's important. That gets to part of my comment to the other panel is a leaderboard for like who create the best metric or the best result. I think that is really important because that also gives incentive for someone to involve, because then they have their name. They have, hey, I'm working on something, they can point to it, right? One of the things in GitHub, you can say, if I'm contributing to a project, then you can see my contributions in the history. I can point to kind of what I'm doing as opposed to in a public space. So there is real value to that. and it incentivizes people who are interested in this field to play around and also kind of make things public, because there's a chance to get credit and get acknowledgement for what they're doing.
Hi, this is Rich Lee. Many of you know me, and I'm going to say I'm representing the industry here versus the great academic research. Also, the takeaways I have, I would give it also an A. It really engaged us, I think, in the object lesson that I think you were trying to deliver to the slab.
Would you mind standing up?
See, we've got clutter in the acoustic environment here too. Can you hear it? Is that better if I do it this way? Okay, I won't go through the whole introduction, but it was a great engagement in the tutorial tool that you had. The only thing I could think off the cuff to improve that tool in the next go round, if you had a range of other elevation out of the slab. I'm sorry, I don't know if that got picked up when we were going out. That insight on the slab and the very few degrees of entry or exit, you know, changing the loss 5 to 15, 20 dB, that was compelling. Sorry, I made a note on a couple other things. If this is not the session to cover this, the promise here is consensus on clutter. And I'm throwing it back to you. Did we reach, or what metrics did you have in mind to reach a consensus on clutter?
With respect to the tutorial or with respect to the conference? Because if it's respect to the conference, hold that question, because there's going to be a panel, Jeremy leading next, so that they can tackle that one.
Anything about the tutorial and how you felt that consensus is there's various parts to it, and one of them is potentially getting folks in the room, working on some problems, giving them tools. Are there any outcomes from that process that, you know, especially Max, you were very engaged with folks here, asking, you know, they're asking questions, a lot of energy in the room. How did that contribute?
Yeah. Well, I guess from the beginning, we weren't sure how many people were going to be interested in the tutorial.
Yeah.
And so we aimed for a tutorial that could interest anyone, really. And if you're really experienced in clutter modeling, maybe you wouldn't have been surprised by any of the outcomes. But I'm happy to hear that the RX elevation angle, just seeing that plot and how that has a clear effect on clutter and clutter loss, is surprising or informative even to you. So that's really nice to hear. I guess what my takeaway, my consensus is that if we put a tutorial on, we should assume that everyone's going to be there for it, and that that kind of tutorial can introduce topics and get people thinking about things that'll actually make the panels more interesting, because they'll have a sense of what we mean when, oh, we're just assuming that all trees and buildings are clutter, but there's actually a difference or whatever, you know, so.
Yeah, and I'll just pick up on that. I think, you know, one of the larger goals to something like this is to, pulling from the other panel, taking a phrase, broaden the community, and and part of that is lowering the bar to entry. And, you know, when we were even test driving it internally, we had people who weren't necessarily even active in this field engaging and being able to, okay, I can follow along. And I think that's valuable, right? We can go, we have ideas of, given that it's been a positive reception, it sounds like, of kind of broadening out. Some people have been talking to me about processing LiDAR. We could do a tutorial space of how do you take a point cloud and extract a terrain model or a structural clutter model. And we can do these things, they can contribute back, because it's all on GitHub, right? There is nothing preventing anyone here from, and Max, correct me wrong, taking the repo and basically doing a pull request with some additional, hey, here's some suggestions to make it better. Here's how you can improve. So this doesn't necessarily have to be purely one directional from ITS to the community, but this really can be an engagement to collectively develop a set of tutorials. What I have told people internally, a 5-year goal of basically a mini, 3-day class on propagation, from interpreting data to applying models to problems. You could build this up into a little kind of seminar space. And it essentially, right, it reinforces, it helps us grow so we can get more people. You can bring in people in university space or parallel fields, like kind of, hey, they talk about these things. I want to get a better feel. And so we think that's where there's a lot of value in that too. And to Max's point, right, we weren't sure initially how well. It seemed like a lot of people engaged. Maybe some of you engaged more than you initially expected. You just kind of, well, let me poke this thing. But it seemed like it came across very approachable, which is glad to hear because that's what we were hoping for.
So I have to apologize up front. I was able to stay for the slide part, but I actually had to step out for the actual where you guys are doing the code. I've developed over the number of years many statistical clutter models in various forms. So I have a lot of ideas, but I don't want to say, oh, did you think about this, that, and anything? So would you mind just quickly, like at the very highest level, what were the things that were demonstrated in the tutorial? And then I could sort of, whatever is other, I can maybe add to that.
Yeah, I mean, so real quick, the tutorial basically is based off a paper we wrote like a year and a half ago for a limited set of data. And it basically modeled clutter as, you could say, a slab on top of the surface of the Earth. And so you looked at the distance, as opposed to a distance dependence on path length, it was a distance dependence, a 3D distance through the slab. And because everything was homogeneous, obviously that slab would have some properties that would be different from other place. That was all, you couldn't look at it because it was just a single data set. 2 different measurement data sets, different, so you had a distribution of elevation angles from 0 to about 10 degrees. And so then you did an optimized regression analysis on that to kind of fit the data. And then the very last step, Max had a lesson 5, where it was basically, okay, now do that, apply what you just did. You regressed on some data, you found there's some optimization, you kind of get a feel of how one way to structure this problem. Let's apply that from Martin Acres to downtown Salt Lake City. And you'll probably laugh because like that's not going to work clearly. But that was again, lower barrier to entry. You think about, okay, well, why would it? Oh, well, obviously they look very different. But again, someone coming from the field may not be immediately obvious. Originally we actually thinking about using a different suburban environment. If you remember, I had some slides and some PDFs of different suburban. You saw they were different, but we wanted something to be a larger juxtaposition. So we picked downtown Salt Lake. And of course, you have line of sight paths, which you don't have. You have high rise, which you don't have. You have vegetation in one, which you don't have in the other. But that all I've said, it got the gears. The idea was to get the gears turning as to what's different. I can visually see differences. Okay, maybe I have to better characterize that slab of clutter. There's just like you might characterize a dielectric slab, right? Like, how could you think about and kind of evolve forward and spitball ideas that you could tinker with on that?
Okay, let me. So, do you have geospatial data available?
Yeah.
DTED, LiDAR.
It was a LiDAR processed. A LiDAR processed digital surface model.
A DSM.
Yeah.
Did you
1 meter resolution.
Did you do a bare Earth?
Yeah.
Both as well, right? NLCD, land cover, land use land cover.
Nope.
All right, so suggestion 1, right? What about tools? You had ITM, obviously. Did you have any other prop tool? You didn't have ITM.
No, we just looked at 2108 on top. Was the one we used for that.
So yeah, the code.
It was because we just looked at kind of statistical modeling of the distribution of clutter.
But you didn't have an actual prop model.
2108 statistical model. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We did because it was again. We thought honestly at the beginning we were going to use ITM, but then we're like, oh, we should talk and explain to people what ITM is, and then scope. Max came at one point and was like, you're going to have to spend an hour just kind of explaining to get people to understand, comprehend ITM. Whereas 2108, the statistical, people can quickly grasp it. There's only a couple of variables. We can see what this is, and we don't have to spend a whole bunch of time giving background information.
All right. So multiple prop models would be another suggestion, right? With some idea of how to for ITM, how to do confidence intervals and how to play with those. What about AI ML tool sets?
Beyond the scope for what we're doing. But
so you're asking for suggestions.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a logistic regression within using scikit.
Any neural net stuff, any of those
No, no, no,
toolboxes,
no.
right? All right. So,
Just a basic logistic regression.
so that's what we do, right? When we could sit down to do a new statistical model, right? We start off with what's all the geospatial data. We have measurement data, hopefully we do, right? For validation or verification, right? That kind of a thing. And then multiple, like you said, multiple locations so that you could develop a model in one place, right? And then see how well it applies to another and things like that. But anyway, I have more detailed suggestions if you like. Because then if my head about this a million times.
The idea was like getting people, having them engage and thinking about what am I doing? How am I viewing the problem, kind of conceptualizing it in a space, and then allowing them to kind of build from that.
Actually, what I'd really like is if sometime in the next couple of weeks you were able to just sit down and go through. You don't have to install anything. You just go to a URL, and if you could step through the tutorial, that would be great. That would be fantastic. And then email us. And
So okay, it's gonna go in and out. All right, I'm gonna go take it. Okay, let's just walk this way. Boom, boom. So, oh no. Well, we'll see. I think to like help lower that barrier to entry, I found it confusing after like basically going to module 3 and onward. The code became very non-self-descriptive and magic numbers were being introduced without much understanding or explanation of like why they were being introduced. Like some basic things of like, oh, we're going to pick a center point, for instance, but it's not the center point of the grid. It's a center point for the analysis area. And so like making the code more human readable is a huge thing. And I think like better incorporation of testing throughout that. So like when you introduce a module, function, whatever you want to call it, doing a unit test to then verify that that code is actually working correctly would be quite helpful in like demonstrating, okay, we say this code does this thing. We can show you the code itself, and then we can show you it actually running and producing a result that you would expect. So I think those are the big things.
Yeah, thanks.
that's really nice.
All right. Well, I think we're letting them off the hook too.
We only got 3 minutes, so. But again, it's going to stay open. We pass it to colleagues, people who might be interested. If you have interns, feel free to give it who might just kind of have them play with the toy. We have ideas how to expand this in both not just modeling, but in the broader scope of propagation. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about machine learning. You said logistic regression.
Mm-hmm.
You choose logistic. I lost it. So why you choose logistic regression? Like you pick just randomly, or you also see other machine learnings?
Oh, why we picked logistic regression? Yeah.
Yes.
When we did the paper, we did look at different ways to kind of regress on the data. The logistic regression was the one that fit best. To be honest, I can't remember the different ways we looked at kind of constructing the model. I'd have to go back and look at my notes because it was like 2.5 years ago off the top of my hat. We do know there are, with respect to certain parameters, there is log-based relationships that we've seen in data before, and you kind of do somewhat hold across different environments. So that was kind of what led us down that path. But I couldn't tell you, I can't remember exactly why it was that and what other ones we looked at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything online? Question?
Nope.
Comments? So comment from Dan Galanos. Hey, Dan. Hey Max, comment on the tutorial with regard to the online experience. While you were walking around answering questions in person, it would have been nice if you were able to stay mic'd up.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, Eric, do you have something to say?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not mic'd up either, but that would be.
So a mic plus a camera feed of some sort where people online who are, or even people in the room could cut it off if they didn't want to watch it, but also could hear your interactions with others so that they knew if they had that problem, they wouldn't have to ask you again. Because I think that as a process thing, that was really well, or maybe you want to incentivize people to sit in the room, but being rude, I did it online, but not in the room, and I was kind of curious as to see where people were having problems and what things people were asking you, because I noticed that like if you just run the code blindly, then you come up with technical questions really quickly, right? You're like, well, okay, well I see this plot. Now what does this plot mean? Or you know, this is the loss once you're in the clutter slab. What does it actually mean? You know, is it a diffusive process and stuff? So there are those types of questions, and then there's a process question. Is like, oh, like can I load different Python packages inside of it and do my own analysis while I'm waiting for you to walk around the load? And the answer was yes, by the way. Can do.
Yeah, I think my personal opinion is the next iteration of this that we would want to target like the tutorial at an actual conference. Build it out, make it a full like half day or full day type sort of thing, and allow.
Did you just call your own conference, not an actual?
No, it's like an IEEE. Sorry, not a self
The
thing.
next ISART.
Yeah,
Sorry.
The well, Jeremy called it day zero, so I'll blame him. We kind of put it out to a broader community of people who just aren't in. Right, you guys all self-selected to attend, so there was a natural interest in this specific topic. But kind of broaden the scope of you have technical people that are coming to a conference for something different, but then will come into, oh, there's some tutorials during it. I'll come in and join this one there, and it starts to kind of broaden and expand the kind of scope of it. And that's where I can envision like that next step from it, whereas you were all captive on this specific topic. So if you told me you weren't interested, I'd question why you were here.
All right. Well, I just want to say a comment because there's a really good comment online from Bradley Evans. More tutorials for the future, one a day. Sorry. He said, begin each conference day with a tutorial that would get us thinking from the start, like a good cup of coffee in the morning. We're going to have to brand it, some Java brand. But yeah, daily, maybe, Max, you said that it made the panels more interesting. And if there is an alignment there.
So we'll have a daily ISART prerequisite starting at 5:30 to 7:30 every morning in this room. It's going to be a lot of fun. Is that what we're saying?
And you will be there next year.
Only if there's donuts. And then,
Okay. Any final thoughts? I'm going to ask the panelists to begin coming up to the front of the stage. Any last thoughts, Max or Billy?
oh, just thanks. Thanks for participating, and thanks for the feedback.
Yeah, and
We're going to do more.
you got another week to kind of spread it around, and please, good, positive and negative feedback. We want it all. But yeah, we do have, Max mentioned it real quick, but we do have a new, you can reach out to us directly, but if you ever don't know, and any of our software tooling and stuff, we just stood up like 2 weeks ago, there's an email address, code@ntia.gov, that actually comes to ITS. So if you have any questions on any of our digital assets out there, you can always shoot an email to that specific address, and it'll get routed to who it needs to go to.
All right. Let's thank Billy and Max.